Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. This is Season 3, Episode 1 of Undercover Gangsta. Now, B-Mac is in charge. It's locked down. Everything has changed, though. Everything has changed. And when you're the head of a gang, the membership looks to you for whatever they need. It's almost like you become a parent to those up under you in some way, shape, or form. It's almost like you become the provider, the nurturer, everything that they need. They look to you. Now, B-Mac, he's head of the Two-Face Mafia, and he has solidified his standing within the organization. Everybody understood. No one dared to try to cross him. You know what I'm saying? But he had these concerns about his situation and his position because of how he came to be head of the Two-Face Mafia. Now, most gang members, they don't fall because they make a mistake. No. As the head, you usually fall because of your own paranoia, things like that. Now, he didn't have the ambitions like J-Mac. He knew that he would be in prison for a long time. He understood how that went. So he wasn't particularly concerned about pleasing the warden or anybody else for that matter, He was going to do his thing. But he had to find a way to control the people up under him, because without controlling them, he knew that one day the truth would come out about all that he and J-Mac had done. And he wanted to be prepared for that day in a way to where when it does come out, he could squash it. Or whatever the resistance to him would be, it wouldn't be of any consequence. Now, in his mind, that would be the end of him if that came out. And he didn't want his reign to end up like J-Mac's or the Tasmanian Devil, He wanted to rule until he couldn't. And he treated everybody with the respect that they deserved, but he wanted it in return. Now, you got to keep in mind, when you elevate to a position like that, you define what respect is. You would define that. Now, he had met this guy. We're going to call him the chemist, though. And the chemist was this young dude that had been in college and gotten in some trouble, after experimenting with different types of drugs, trying to create his own new thing, right? He wanted to figure out a way to where he didn't have to deal with the drug dealers in his neighborhood and all of these types of things. And in the process of doing all that, he got in trouble and ended up in prison. But when he got put in prison, his skill set was one that most people in prison would die for. So when B-Mac came to understand who he was, he would have these conversations with him over the chess games that they would play. And the chemist would tell him all of these things that he did while he was on the street and all of that kind of stuff. And then one day B-Mac told him, he said, look, why don't you go on and experiment some more? And see, that's when he came up with this new thing. Now, I know in the last episode in Season 2, I exposed you to this ghost smoke. But now I wanted to make sure to go back a little bit so I can give you some context on how this ghost smoke came about and who's responsible. And the person that's responsible for it, we're going to call him the chemist. That's what B-Mac called him. That's what we're going to call him. And now the chemist, he understood how all the chemical compounds work in everyday chemicals, everyday appliances, everyday things that you use around the house. So when he told B-Mac that there was this one chemical that was involved in the production of what we're going to call it that bug spray, right? It was this one chemical that would cause the same reaction to the brain that if you smoke weed and drink liquor. And see, when B-Mac heard this, he was interested, but he didn't have the knowledge base to fully understand what it was that the chemist was talking about. So he told him, he said, break this down for me. Make me understand this better, because I don't want to do anything that's going to cause me any more problems. But if what you're saying is true, we can shake something. So the chemist continued to explain to him what it would do and all this and that, right? So he said, the best thing for me to do is to create some, and then we'll test it. So it wasn't a matter of him creating this chemical. The chemical was already there. He just needed B-Mac to get him the product. Get him the product so he could nurture it along. Now the process wasn't complicated. He just had to figure out the density. How much could he apply to whatever device it was going to be used to deliver? Because you got to have something that's going to be able to deliver the product to the body, right? So he experimented day after day once B-Mac got him the bug spray. And he figured out exactly how to coat the paper. But once he did that, once he thought he had it the way it should be, he had to be sure. And the only way for him to be sure was for him to test it on somebody. He had to test it. That's just how they do in the labs on the streets. And so he told B-Mac, and B-Mac was more than willing to find some individuals to test it. He wasn't going to do it, and he wasn't going to let none of the brothers do it. So he went and got some people that, they already get high. And he said, look here, I need you to try something for me. So when he got him and he brought him to the cell, he said, here, try this. And they said, how are we going to do it? So the chemist, he said, burn it. I just need you to burn it and inhale the smoke. So they burned it and they inhaled it. Kind of like what they do when they freebase. You understand what I'm saying? And let me explain that. You know how they take something, they put it in aluminum foil, and then they get it hot up under the aluminum foil, and they melt it and all this and that, and the smoke that's coming up off of it, they inhale it. That's what they do. Okay? But in this situation, it was just burn the paper and inhale the fumes. You feel me? Because it's going to go up in smoke. And when they inhaled it, you could watch them, and then B-Mac looking at him, he saw the eyes rolling to the back of their heads, and then the chemist, he's looking at him, he's trying to observe anything about their body that's changing, anything that's going on, because he wants to get this right before he puts it out. And he sees them, and they lean back in the chair, and that high comes over them. And they stoop down in the chair, they just slide down. And as they're sliding down, B-Mac is looking at him. He looks at him, and he says, is it working? So the chemist said, just wait a minute, let's see. A couple of seconds later, you will see the guy that was experimenting for them, the guinea pig, he would open his eyes. He just nodded his head up and down. Feel good? He just nodded his head. Nodded his head up and down. He was good and high. But a few seconds later, his body started twitching. He started twitching. Then he locked up like he was having a seizure. And when he did that, the chemist grabbed his hand and said, are you okay? And the guinea pig looked at him almost unaware that he was having a seizure and nodded his head up and down. Couldn't say a word, but nodded his head up and down with a smile on his face. It's almost like he was enjoying what was happening to him. So after 15 or so minutes, he came all the way back down. So B-Mac told him to leave the room. So once he left the room, he's talking to the chemist. The chemist says, okay, I like what that did, but I don't know about the seizure. What was that? I don't understand that. So he said, I got to do some more reading. I got to figure out this. So he did some more reading. He had all of these books about, about chemistry and stuff like that, right, that he had when he was in college. He had his family sent in to him. So he's reading all of these things in these books, and he's trying to understand, what is that? What did that do to him to make him have a quote-unquote something that looked like a seizure? So as he continued to read, he learned that this particular chemical that was doing the same thing to the brain that weed or cocaine or heroin or liquor or anything else would do, release those endorphins or that dopamine, he learned that this particular chemical attacks the nervous system of bugs. Yeah, when I say raid, I mean raid, just like what you spray to kill cockroaches. It attacks the nervous system. So that amount, in the way that it did, it caused the same reaction in this human, the guinea pig. He said, So B-Mac said, is that the worst it can be? And the chemist looked at him and said, I don't know, we're just going to have to find out. So day after day after day, they kept getting somebody to come into the room to try it. And they had different reactions. They had some people that would vomit and throw up. Some people that would poop and piss all over themselves. It was all over the place what was going on with them. But one thing was certain, one thing was consistent, and that was that they were getting a high. And after a couple of weeks, B-Mac said, why are we continuing to test it? Let's put it out. Let's see what the market will give us. So the chemist looked at him and told him, he said, I'm not sure if we should do that, but let's do it. Let's see what happens. And within the next couple of days, he had made enough that he could spread out, or so he thought. Once he put it out there, because initially people were skeptical, other than the couple of people that were the guinea pigs, they had been talking about it. Because B-Mac had told them to. Letting everybody know, man, they got that fire. Nobody really believed that it was a piece of paper that you take and you burn it. But they got that fire. They had no idea what was on it, what was going on, or none of that. But they had that fire. So when B-Mac handed it out to a few of the brothers, he told them, no using for the brothers. Sell it. So they said, well, how much do we sell this for? He said, initially, I need you to give it away, and then we're going to figure out how to price it. But give it away. So he had about 10 or 12 brothers who handing it out all over the compound, telling people and showing them actually how to use it. And they would watch them, and they were getting high. And before you know it, everybody was hearing about this new drug called that ghost smoke. Everybody wanted it. Two-Face Mafia had it. Before you know it, the individuals, the gangs, and all the other people that were selling the heroin, the cocaine, and all the other things that they had out there, they wasn't making as much money as they were before this ghost smoke hit the compound. And now it's spreading around all over the compound. And even the individuals that were selling other kind of drugs are starting to use it. They want to know what's going on. And most people, listen, let me tell you something now. Most people, not all, but most people that hustle and get money that way, they like to make sure they can test their product or have somebody near them that can test the product, right? But this right here, they wanted to know for themselves what the competition was all about. So when they tried it, they wanted more. It was highly addictive because it gave them pleasure beyond anything that they had ever experienced. Yeah, you had people pooping and pissing all over themselves, throwing up, passing out, having what looked like seizures, just laying stuck. Some people walking around the pod and just stuck in a position, just upright on their feet, hands locked up, looking like a cockroach. How they look when they on their back with their hands all up and their feet all up in the air, but they look like that standing up, and they just be frozen, can't move. People talking to them, it's almost like they can hear what you're saying, but they can't do nothing about it. They can't move. They're stuck, and then after a few minutes, they come to, and then they'll start walking again, and all they would do is just smile. That's what this stuff was doing. So here we go. Now, B-Mac's got what he wants. Because he didn't want to have to go to anybody else. He wanted to do something to corner the market. He wanted to do something that would give him total control. And only one other person knew what was going on. And that was the chemist. But he didn't need the chemist anymore. He didn't need the chemist anymore. He didn't want the chemist to be that type of person that would be able to branch out on his own. So he made sure that the chemist was locked away and wouldn't talk to anybody about what was going on. He made sure that he was the only one that could control that. You understand what I'm saying? So when he talked to the chemist, he told the chemist, look, you can never share what you've shown me with anybody else. You can never share this with anybody else. And the chemist assured him that he wouldn't. But again, in the penitentiary, your loyalty is to yourself. It's not to any and everybody. So the chemist made sure that he complied with whatever he was saying. But at the end of the day, it was all about what he wanted. So he told them, I won't say a word to anybody. I won't say a word to anybody. So, to make a long story short, the chemist started making side deals with the other gang members. He said he wouldn't tell them what it was, but he could create something for them. It's not that B-Mac wasn't paying him good. It's just that the chemist was ambitious. You see, you got to remember something. See, when he was on the streets, this is what he got in trouble for. He was trying to come up with his own thing. He didn't need B-Mac. The only reason him and B-Mac ended up business partners is because they used to play chess together and B-Mac was in charge. That was the only reason. And that was hard for a lot of people to understand because it came to a head. Yeah, everybody assumed that the chemist and B-Mac were real good friends. But one day, B-Mac found out that the chemist was making side deals. And he understood no matter what, he couldn't allow, tolerate, put up with none of that. So he had made up his mind that the chemist had to go. No, he didn't want to lay him down. You know what I'm talking about when I say lay him down. He didn't want to lay him down, but he wanted to show him a thing or two. Remind him of his place. He wanted to remind him of his place. And let him decide if he wanted to stay on the compound or not. So he sent a couple of them hard hitters into the cell and touched him up a little bit. I'm talking about put it on him bad. Broke his jaw. They wired him up. He couldn't even talk. So when B-Mac bumped down on him after he came back from the hospital, he said, I told you, don't say a word to anybody about this. And I see that you've been making side deals with the ops. And he said one thing for sure, two things for certain. Two-Face Mafia runs this. So the chemist, he's looking at him, eyes big as a $50. He's staring at B-Mac with fear running through him. And he grabs a piece of paper and he writes down on the piece of paper, I'm sorry. B-Mac looks at him and looks down at the piece of paper and he stares at him and he tells me, he said, look, I normally don't give people second chances. I'm sure you've heard about me. Chemist nodded his head up and down as to signify that he understood. He said, but I'm going to give you one because you've helped me out a lot. Now, you got to keep in mind, this ghost smoke is spreading all over the compound. And let me tell you something. B-Mac has ambitions about spreading this out all throughout the prison system. But only to the Two-Face Mafia. Only to Two-Face Mafia. So he said, but I'm going to give you a second chance because I might need you. Do you understand what I'm saying? He shook his head up and down. Now, to make it worse, B-Mac leaned forward, got face to face with it. He said, but if you ever cross me again, I won't be so sympathetic next time. Do you understand? And when he asked him, do you understand, he patted him on his jaw. You know how you pat somebody on the face like you're going to slap him, but it's real soft and gentle? That's what he did. He patted him on the jaw. Just enough. Now, if you've ever known anybody or been the victim of a broken jaw, you already know you don't need nobody touching your face. You don't need nobody touching your face. But when B-Mac patted him on his jaw, his eyes got bigger. The pain shot through his whole head. But he didn't dare smack B-Mac's hand away. He didn't dare do that. Because the fear was running through him. He didn't know what to do. He wouldn't dare do that. So now that B-Mac had taken care of this problem and felt as though everything was under control again, he said, now it's time to spread this throughout the state and lock it all the way down and make all the money. He understood what it was, but let me tell you something. The word of this new drug, this ghost smoke, had made its way down front. The administration had heard about what was going on, and they heard that it was Two-Face Mafia that was behind it. Now, let me tell you something. In the penitentiary, when they have an epidemic on their hands, and this is what this had the potential to be, they got to do something about that. But see, this is something new. And see, the mechanism that they have to deal with any kind of drugs wasn't going to work with this one. It wasn't going to work with this, but they don't know that yet. So now they send their informants out to find out what's going on and who's behind it, so they can come up with a course of action. And if you want to hear what that was and how they went about it, you're going to have to tune in to the next episode, right? This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.
I'm getting